Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Gillian, and today we have an amazing epic video in store for you guys. We have Professor Spira, the legend himself, in the house, and he is an expert on the mucusless diet. And rightfully so, this diet completely changed his life many, many years ago. I believe he lost about 110 pounds when he took on this diet and completely changed his life, fixed all his health problems. And he is now an expert on Arnold Ehret's Way, his book, and everything. So we're gonna get right into it. We have so many great questions of you guys that you guys asked as well. So let's say hello. Hey, Professor Spira, how's it going?
Great. How are you doing?
Good. I hope I did you justice in that. You're also an author as well. And yeah, I'm amazing. I'm really excited. I would love to start with your story. I think way back when I read in your bio around 2002, you were overweight, you were a college football player, had a number of health problems. So if we could start there, I would love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. So coming up, I was destined, they said genetically, I was destined to be sick because I had a very sick mother. And they say, heart disease runs in your family, diabetes runs in your family. And my mother was always in and out of the hospital. So I grew up in nursing homes and hospitals with visiting my mom. And then I was raised by my aunt and my grandma. And I'd really developed kind of mother son bond with my grandma. And when I was age 10, she passed away. And that totally devastated me.
Mm.
I was not expecting that, didn't understand what was going on. And so that really was traumatic for me. A week after that, my mother ended up in the hospital with after a congestive heart failure, got a double bypass surgery. Then she never came back home. She lived the next 2 years of her life in a nursing home and then finally passed away. And I was at the age of 12. And so at that time, I just thought, well, I guess this is my lot in life. Because as a young person, I was always very sick. Had they put me on like different all kinds of pharmaceutical medications, but everything from like allergy medications since I was 7 years old that I was supposed to take every day, the Seldane and Allegra and Claritin. I went through all of those. I had chronic bronchitis year after year. I would get just bouts of bronchitis, really bad inflammation and hemorrhoids and inflammation in the colon and just all kinds of issues. But nobody was saying that, you might want to change your diet. It was just all, well, it's too bad,
Mm.
just genetics. And so when I went to college, I was a varsity football player. I was one of them kids that kind of did everything. They say when kids have a traumatic upbringing, sometimes or lose somebody close to them in their life, they'll go one of two ways. Sometimes they'll go and kind of become bad kids, or they'll be like overachievers. And I kind of went that route where I came in Boy Scouts, something called Eagle Scout, became Eagle Scout at the age of 15, and just did all these different things, and ultimately decided to pursue music. And got accepted in the College Conservatory of Music, University of Cincinnati. And that's where I met my friend, Brother Air, aka Willie Smart Jr., who introduced me to the mucusless diet healing system. And this happened. I had known him for about a year, and at that time, I was as big as I'd ever been. I was about 300 pounds. Here's a little before and after of me back in those days. So the one on the left hand side, that was around 2001. And then 2001, 2002. And then on the right was a year later,
Wow.
after I'd lost about 100 pounds after changing my lifestyle. And so I learned about the mucusless diet while I was actually at a jam session with Willie Smart. And in between, they have a buffet where they have all like chicken wings and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I'd got this big plate of all it is meat and nastiness, and was sitting there just eating it across from him. And I saw his face kind of transform, like he just couldn't hold it anymore. He had to tell me about what he knows. And he started talking about diet, started talking about he had ate nothing but fruit for an entire year, and just all this stuff that was just kind of blowing my mind and making sense at the same time. And eventually I'm just looking down at this plate, like I was just slowed down. I'm looking down at this plate like I'm probably not going to be ever eating this stuff again, because it was just everything was making sense. And so that's when I got a copy of the Mucusless Diet Healing System by Professor Arnold Ehret, read that book, and that was it. And I
Wow.
really dove into, just had my mind totally blown by the information in that book, and just dedicated myself to practicing those principles in the system. And within 6 months, I was off of pharmaceutical medications. They had diagnosed me with sleep apnea. I was 18 years old, wearing a CPAP unit at night, where they pump oxygen into your nose because you're not breathing properly
Wow.
when you sleep. So much, I just was able to eliminate and detoxify so much mucus out of my system, and to the point where I could smell. I'm like, oh wow, I can I can just normal things that you would think we would enjoy.
Hmm.
Like now my sense of smell is off the chain. I can taste things that I could never taste before. I crave and desire foods and the things that don't hurt me now. And so yeah, so that was kind of that
Wow.
period. And it was one of those things where I just got so laser focused and so motivated, because I was searching for that. If you go back to like 2000, 2001, I was researching all kinds of different philosophical texts and biblical texts and religious and theology and just all this stuff, kind of looking for answers to what is the foundational cause of human suffering. That's
Hmm.
just from a philosophical standpoint. I wanted to know that. And I was looking at what was supposed to be the greatest minds and some of the greatest people in history to see what they had to say about it. And nothing was really hitting. And I
Yeah.
was like, this isn't like, yeah, there's some good observations here, but nothing is really nailing it. And when I read the Mucusless Diet Healing System, that's when I was like, there it is. That's the missing link that I've been looking for. This is that he nails the foundation, not only of human illness, but human suffering. And so
Yeah.
I was like, all right, I'm gonna get on this path, because this is
Yeah.
what I've been looking for.
And what are like the main points of that for anybody who doesn't know? Like, what is that system? And what did you start eating? Like, how did you change your lifestyle? What would a typical day look like that caused all this healing and this transformation in you?
So the Mucusless Diet Healing System is a transitional dietary and lifestyle system that includes, instead of just trying to go overnight into 100% of anything, whether 100% mucus free or 100% raw or anything like that, you gradually use foods. So use less harmful foods to get off of the most harmful foods first. And as you clean yourself out, you start to crave the worst foods less and less. So an example would be, and I know, and the disclaimer, because I know some of there's going to be some hardcore raw foodists that are not going to always like what I have to say when it comes to using cooked food as a transitional tool to, of
Mm,
course, get to more and more raw lifestyle. But I want to see people sustain it once they get there, to sustain it for the rest of their life, so we don't have folks falling off the wagon and all these and becoming a statistic of the recent rash of ex-vegans and all that kind of stuff.
yeah.
The transition diet methodology can really help prevent that from ever happening, because it's not so kind of narrow in terms of the approach. And so, coming from where I was coming from, because I had a horrible, probably a worse diet of anybody you've had on
Yeah, I
here.
was gonna ask, so what were you typically eating in a day before and then now? Or then?
So yeah, so
Yeah.
before, I mean, I all day was just gluttony fest. But I'll give you an example of, so I would go. There was this place called the Root Beer Stand in Sharonville, Ohio, and I used to go there. I would get 2 foot longs with chili and cheese. That's foot long hot dogs with chili and cheese, a cheeseburger, a root beer float, and a bag of popcorn. And that was
Wow.
one that was one meal.
Wow.
It's yeah, and
And how did you feel after that meal versus like eating the real foods when you transitioned?
well, I mean, it's a whole other, it's just a whole other reality, when you're, it's like any other addiction, and that's one thing I like to talk about, the addiction to pus and mucus forming foods. People don't like to look at that as an addiction, but until you take it away, you don't realize, like, oh wow, like I really craving mucus forming food. And so, yeah, I mean, just a whole other, because I would eat it and I would be stimulated and all, kind of hopped up and getting high. But then, 15 minutes later, you're like, oh God. Yeah, I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
just feel absolutely horrible. And so versus when you're on the mucus free path, it's like, it's the challenge. There's always hills and valleys and plateau points and challenges. And so it's not all just like, oh, wow, I'm eating the right food and I feel great. It's like, no, we have to
Yeah.
pay reparations for having had generations of problematic eating. We're not going to clean all that up in a couple days. Like, we're going to have to
Yeah.
spend time really cleaning up our blood, transforming our physiology back to something that resembles a human diet, because we've
Mm-hmm.
gotten so far away from it.
Mm-hmm. And what is the best way to clean that up and to do that? And the best way to transition? Because I know a lot of people too, like they have a hard time with the cravings. If you have any
Mm-hmm.
tips on that, I know that can be a big barrier for people.
Yeah. So what really helped me, and I know not everybody agrees with this, and that's fine. I'm not here. I don't want to start any wars or arguments, but practitioners of the mucus diet healing system in our community do something called lemon juice and distilled water enemas. So the colon irrigation. So we're in favor of, and people ask, well, what about colonics? Or we're like,
Mm-hmm.
all of that to us is cool. And people say, well,
Mm-hmm.
that's unnatural. It's like, we spent generations and generations ruining our genetic makeup, our tissue system, our body, our we have to use some tools that's going to help us along. And so when you use the enema strategically, that's when you can start to really eliminate some really nasty stuff. And I always like to show people the mucoid plaque topic.
Yeah.
I don't know why some people say that it's not real, it doesn't exist. And I'm like, look, if you start getting serious about cleaning yourself out, this stuff is very real.
Yeah,
And
I know some people will be like, that's part of the intestines, that or that mucus is there to protect us. That's normal. Like I know that's what a lot of people say.
yeah, not the
Did you
black
have
that
you personally removed mucoid plaque?
oh man. I mean,
That's
everything on here, these aren't my pictures, but not all of them, but everything on here, I've had stuff that resembles that come out of me.
wow.
And stuff that even look worse than this, but like you get this black tar looking stuff up there. And
Yeah.
that was a big deal when I got the black tar elimination out. I call that like the black tar mucoid plaque elimination, because it's common. Some you really only eliminate that once usually, because
Wow.
that's like old. It's just an old buildup of stuff. And I made a video where I analyzed this colonoscopy video where they're going through the intestines, and you can see they were looking at the insides of somebody that and mind you, of course, they had to already do those unnatural laxatives to even get the camera in there. But for people that they said, like a 50-year-old woman with breast cancer, the whole lining of her colon was just black tar,
Wow.
just old black
Unbelievable.
tar. Why? Because we have, not only do we have, yes, the mucous membrane in the body produces mucus, but it's the body mucus, and mucus of the lymphatic system is not the exact same thing as mucus left behind from uneliminated unnatural food substances. And so, yes, that's going to mix together, and then it's going to cause whatever it's going to cause. And it is trying to do something with it because it doesn't want that waste in the body, but it's really about the uneliminated unnatural food substance.
Hmm.
So that develops from childhood on. So when
Wow.
you eat any kind of mucus forming food item or pus forming food item from birth, it digests. And yeah, the stomach, because some people argue, well, the stomach acid deals with it. Well, it's going to break some of it down, and then a little bit more, then you have a bowel movement, and some of it's going to leave, but there's a residue that lives, because we're not supposed to have to wipe when you go, when you have a
Yeah.
bowel movement, it's like, but that slimy residue, imagine that's like, okay, imagine that over 20 years, over 30 years of 40 years of, and somebody that's never cleansed, that never did an enema, never, and you start to get 40 or 50 years of buildup of this very acidic, nasty, toxic waste. And it's no wonder that there are increased cases of any kind of colon, the colon cancers and and we got to cut out part of your intestine and that kind of stuff. It's very simple. That acid is destroying the
Yeah.
cells in there because there's just this buildup of decades old waste, uneliminated
That's
feces
like
stones.
even
Just
so long ago, someone discovered, right? And they won a Nobel Peace Prize for discovering that cancer can't survive in an alkaline environment. And it's like acidity is just so toxic for us.
yeah.
And I'm wondering, so with the mucoid plaque, like what impact do you think this has on our life and our body to remove this from our body?
Well, I mean, it allows it allows you to be able to actually absorb whatever it is you put in. The fruits and the vegetables that you put in your body can now be absorbed, can increase the elimination. So we come from a perspective that focuses more on the concept of elimination than the concept of nutrition, which is another kind of controversial thing. But we're looking at the body like, wait a minute, the most important thing is elimination. And when you eat the proper fruits and vegetables, you aid your body in elimination, not only in your colon and intestines, but also on the cellular level in your blood, get your lymphatic system to move properly. Everything's good. And so we focus on the cleansing process because each breath is a cleansing. You're
Hmm.
cleaning your blood. It's a cleansing process. Everything we do, we wake up, and if somebody gets some mucus in their eyes coming out or blowing the nose, or stuff coming out of the skin, it's all about elimination. And so
Yeah.
why are we
Now
in
that you
this?
say that about the mucus in the eye too, I noticed like I barely have that since I've gone raw. I used to wake up
Yeah.
with like a lot of sleep around my eyes. So that's mucus,
Yeah.
right? And that's from the diet being
Exactly.
cleaner.
Yeah. Because that was another thing I experienced when I was real young. I would actually wake up with my eyes would be glued shut
Yeah.
with that
Wow.
crust.
I've had that before
Great.
too. That's insane. That's when you know maybe there's something going on
Something's wrong.
inside
Right.
and you need to maybe
Exactly.
start taking a new route. So with the mucoid plaque, just I want to talk for one more sec about
Hmm.
that. What do you think is the ideal way to remove that? And do you think it can only be removed on a juice cleanse? Because a lot of people say like you can't get it out even with enemas, like it has to be like a juice cleanse.
Oh no, I definitely disagree with that. I mean, I've
Mm,
had it come out at
wow.
all times, different, but particularly so part of the system is where it's not just about fasting, or it's just not just about eating
Hmm.
the fruits and vegetables or the salads. It's like how you combine those items. And when you do it systematically, so for instance, say you have a mono fruit meal in the afternoon, and you have a big raw salad, and maybe if you're transitioning, you have some cooked mucus free foods, or like a cooked like baked zucchini or something like that. There's certain things that are like 100% mucus free when you bake them, but they help you with your transition. You have that in the evening, and you're doing that for a little while, throwing some lemon juice and distilled water enemas in there. Then you have a 24-hour fast or a 48-hour juice feast or whatever you want to
Hmm.
call it. And if you're doing enemas throughout all that, you're gonna clean yourself out, because the fruit, and one of the reasons why you eat fruit first, this is a principle, whether you have fruit for lunch, if you're having a fruit meal, or if you're combining fruit and vegetables in the same meal. What Arnold Ehret recommends in MUCUSLESS diet is you eat your fruit course first, wait 15 minutes, and then follow it up with the vegetables, with the salad. But what that does, the fruit is more aggressive in terms of its astringent properties. It's loosening things up,
Hmm.
and then the vegetables and the salad are like a broom that's just going to come and just sweep it away. And so you get that kind of back and forth systematically. Throw a little fasting in there, throw a little colon irrigation, and now you're turning your body into an elimination machine,
And you're
where it's
starting to feel good, you know? You're
oh, you
like,
feel
wow, I'm
so yeah,
feeling
you
better
feel
than I
so much
felt.
better. I mean, it's night and day. Yeah, when you get out some of these just big old things, a mucoid plaque, you get the worms coming out, stuff that looks like, man, that's a tapeworm.
Yeah. Yeah. I got out
And
so many a few years ago when I started doing enemas. I did not expect it. I was like, let me try remove mucoid plaque. I see all these videos on it and I wasn't juicing or anything. I was just like,
right.
let me try. And I was eating a clean raw diet and I saw all kinds of parasites. And then I would feel so good when I released them.
Yeah.
So I kept doing them for a cleanse, but it was like, whoa, what is going on? This is gross, right?
Yeah.
Do you think
And
you're in there partly because of the mucoid plaque too, and just the whole acidic
yeah,
environment?
just the whole yeah, exactly. I mean, the whole acidic environment. What I try to do is, we talk about cleanliness. It's about being clean.
Hmm.
And the cleaner you get, the less likely you're going to have any kind of parasites. They like filth. They want to enjoy the acids and the uneliminated proteins and uneliminated fats and all that kind of stuff. They love that. But when your insides are clean and you constantly you have a lifestyle that cleanses all the time, like what you eat and what you drink and what you put in and on your body is promoting the cleansing process, they have nowhere to go. And I will say, another one of the mucoid plaque false beliefs is that it always has to be taking some kind of like bentonite clay and charcoal and all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
No, you can,
Yeah.
if just doing the principles of the MUCUSLESS diet, you can get so much of this stuff out. I went really 10 years before I even really messed with, I got into herbology about 10 years in. And before that, it was all the foods and using them. It's like how you use the foods, how you combine them, which ones you decide to use, which ones you decide to avoid. All that kind of stuff impacts how your body goes through this process.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you think people need to be careful not doing too many enemas? Like they're great for cleansing in that cleansing period, but maybe not like all the time long term. Do you think they can like disrupt our microbiome and stuff like that?
I don't believe that because I know there's too many of us that have done them for long periods of time. And now what I recommend generally for people is to say, if they've never done them, is do them every day for 2 weeks, just like a cleanse. Like you turn
Hmm.
it into just sort of a cleanse kind of experience, experiment, but do it for 2 weeks. And then at that, you'll know enough about it to where you can make an informed decision. Because most of the people that talk negatively about enemas either never did them, or they did them improperly, or they did something like, I'm not a big fan of coffee enemas. I'm pretty much hardcore lemon juice and distilled water in terms of what I use for it. And so, but there's a lot of people that write about it that say, oh, it's going to cause you to not have natural bowel movements anymore. It's going to mess up your biome and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, not that's just not true if you're practicing the system properly, you
Yeah,
know.
maybe it's a lot when people are doing coffee every day. I remember I was doing coffee
Yeah.
once for a bit, and
Mm-hmm.
then they were a bit addictive, and I was like, man, I feel good after these. I was like, this is the right way. But then I realized, okay, this is the caffeine. It's a bit much. And
Yeah,
was starting to
yeah.
mess with my electrolytes and stuff too. So I think people should be careful with that.
Yeah, and then there are cases where if somebody has a really compromised, and this just gets deeper into the naturopathy element of it in the healing methodologies. If I'm dealing with somebody that has a really compromised endocrine system and really weakened adrenal glands and that kind of thing, then I'm going to say, okay, well, maybe do less enemas or hold off on those, and let's use some of the herbal stomach and bowel formulas. Arnold Ehret has one of the earliest herbal stomach and bowel formulas called Inner Clean that he recommends. Of course,
Hmm.
nowadays there's a lot of things out there, but so when you get down into it, you look at all the different tools, because that's how I look at these things. Is there are all these different tools of naturopathy that we have, and it's a tool, and it's a very effective tool that can be very, very helpful for, and especially when you're starting out and you're talking about the folks that are craving really bad foods, because that would be something that would really help me out. If in the early days when I was still craving meat, then I would be like, man, I need to go do an enema, put a bunch of lemon juice in there. And that got rid of that craving. It was like, boom, because the only reason that we crave those things is because those poisons are in our system. Once you
Hmm.
get that out of there, then at least especially the worst stuff, you're no longer going to crave that. But it's definitely part of the journey that I just encourage people to read the MUCUSLESS diet book, and then make a decision on what you want to do with it. But I can say that there's a lot of people that need to do lemon juice and distilled water enemas,
Yeah.
because it just They're just really, really constipated. And even people that think that they eat really healthy, like, man, I'm eating healthy and this kind of
True.
stuff, but there's still bunch of issues and what's going on. Well, they never really clean themselves out, because that's an issue too, where you have people, they change their diet and like overnight they're eating this beautiful diet, fruits and vegetables and fresh juice and just the best diet in the world. And they keep that up for a week, a couple weeks, or some of them can maybe do it for a month or something. Then all of a sudden they have an incredible relapse, and
Mm-hmm.
have to, sometimes they go all the way back to the worst foods. We have all the epidemic of raw meat carnivorism,
Oh,
relapsation.
yeah.
I mean, but that's all, in my opinion, because of the lack of transition methodology and the lack of cleansing. They never really clean themselves out properly to change their physiology to a point where that makes it impossible for them to eat those foods.
Mm-hmm. This raw meat trend, like people eating this raw meat, like I'm not dogmatic. You got to do what you want to do, but to me, it's like,
Right.
don't people get sick eating that? And isn't it like loaded with parasites? Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Well,
it's
before
rough.
we get into the foods, I want to talk about the foods, like what to eat, what's mucus
Mm,
forming, what's not. But I want to talk quick about your juice cleanse. You did mention
mm.
before we hopped on here, I think you're on day 8, right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
awesome. So how is that experience going?
Yeah, it's going great. I feel great. Now I've done a lot of, juice cleanses and all kinds of different, from water fasting and dry fasting and juice periods, and being 100% mucus free, being mucus lean is what we call it when we include a little bit of mucus in there. But yeah, this one's been, been feeling great, and I take it a day at a time. I never like to start off with some kind of number, like, okay, I'm gonna do 20 days, I'm gonna do
Yeah,
21. I just,
smart.
part of the really right out of the book, kind of part of the methodology is just look at how things go day by day. If you And then also when it's time to break it, for me that's like the most important part. It's like not the actual fasting. I mean, that's great, but how well do you break it, and how long are you able to be mucus free after you break it? Because
Mhm.
oftentimes people break, they're like, yeah, man, I did a 30-day cleanse, but I broke it, and then I went and I ate like a bunch of, just a bunch of avocados and corn chips, and like fell off the wagon. And that's why I'm like, yeah, but so I recommend, sometime I'm gonna put a number to it, but for however long you fast, you should be 100% mucus free for a period of time after that, and
Mhm.
transition back into whatever your mucus lean plateau point would be. But yeah, no, it's feeling good. I've been finding some decent pineapples, just juicing pineapples, and some
Amazing.
mandarins, and
Yeah,
lemon. I always like to put a lemon in there, and yeah, it's
that's
been
awesome.
good.
And how do we know when we're mucus free? Like I've done some cleansing over the years, and I know before I was raw, my sinuses used to get super clogged up. They said you have sinusitis. My bowels were a mess. I had no energy. Now, 6 years raw, I have so much energy. My sinuses, I breathe better than ever. My digestion is clean. But how do I know if I still have some mucus in me? Is there any way to know for sure?
Well, so the mucus, we all have, like I said, there's this difference
Yeah.
between the lymphatic system kind of reaction that we might have to something, and a buildup of waste and toxic stuff as you start to eat cleanly. And what's really amazing about the body's intelligence is it chooses what it wants to deal with, and it's not always in the order that we want. Because sometimes we're like, man, I want to heal this thing, and you start to eat cleanly and fast, and then the body starts healing stuff that you weren't even thinking about, and you're
Hmm.
like, oh, wait a minute, my back feels better, and my hand doesn't hurt anymore, and I'm like, okay, but I still want this other thing to heal. And it's like prioritizes things in a certain order. And so it's one of those things where, because of that intelligence, unless you're too aggressive, it's not going to hit you too hard and just demand that you go through, like, just healing, this never ending healing crisis. Like, I
Hmm.
don't like to see that when people push themselves so hard and try to perpetual fasting. They don't really take a step back. They don't want to go back as far as maybe they need to go into some cooked mucus free foods, or even some mucus forming stuff. And for me, it's when you're working the system, which is the key, it's okay. It's okay to do what you need to do because
Yeah.
you're working things out of your body. You're working the addictions out. You're working mentally, things are transforming as well, physically, from the, as they say, body, mind, and spirit. But
Mm-hmm.
in terms of, because we're really here, we would be talking about latent versus acute ailments, so that what happens with when you get raw and you start to clean yourself up, any of that acute eliminations come out and leave
Mm-hmm.
immediately. Now, anything that's a little deeper down into your tissue system that's going to take a little bit longer to deal with and heal, then that's where, don't be surprised down the road where you just have days where you don't go through an elimination. Like we say, we don't really call it being sick. We say you're going through an elimination,
Mm-hmm.
and the body's saying, okay, now it's time for this. Let's work on this and eliminate that. And I was like 10 years in, and I started having these weird side effects to just eliminations. And I'm like, what is this? And as I analyzed it, I started to think, wait a minute, these side effects feel a lot like the side effects that would go along with the allergy medication that I took for years. And so
Mm-hmm.
I went online and I looked up side effects of that allergy medication, and I was going through every one of those side effects. And so I was detoxing out that. It took that long to get down to that layer in my tissue system to detox that stuff out. But it's important that the body does that, because if you get that stuff out too fast, it shocks the system, and can even become like really dangerous, when you deal with depending on what the drugs are that's in your system.
Mm-hmm. And where do you think you would be today if you hadn't discovered all this in the early like 2000s or whatever?
Yeah, I would be. I don't know this guy would. I don't know if this guy would even be here anymore,
Yeah.
honestly. Because I used to think that I would probably be one of those statistics that would maybe get a have a stroke in my 30s or something like that. Because I
Mm-hmm.
just, if I'd have stayed on that and just that chronic overeating and eating entire large pizzas to myself and all this kind of stuff, it was and it was only going to get worse, because the only reason I don't even look worse in these pictures was because I, as a varsity athlete, I ate real bad, but I was working out a lot.
Yeah.
But when I got to college, I'm practicing my trombone for 10 hours a day, but I'm not working out anymore. And so that's
Mm-hmm.
when it's, yeah, like, just it was getting really bad. And so I'm just very, very thankful every day
Yeah.
that I found this information when I did, and I had the
And a lot of
opportunity.
people are. You help so many people. And I feel like you've been through a lot of trauma, like especially when you were like, young, losing family members like that. That must have just been the hardest experience ever. Do you feel like you became a lot stronger because of that and you found purpose in those experiences? Or like, do you have any advice for anybody out there to get through like some childhood trauma that they've been through or trauma?
Yeah, I mean, I understand now that I had to go through what I went through to be able to do what I'm doing today and to help the people that I'm helping today, because I just got a perspective that the majority of young people don't necessarily get, in terms of just the amount of time that I spent in hospitals and nursing
Hmm.
homes as somebody that's visiting. I know there's a lot of folks that maybe had some illnesses and found themselves in there, but in my case, I was going for years and years, and I just knew something wasn't right. I just looked around here and I'm like, this is wrong. Something's wrong with this. This is not natural for humans to end up in these incapacitated states, in these, what are they're poor, kind of poorhouses. The history of
Hmm.
nursing homes, which I recently have been reading up on, they're kind of come out of the tradition of poorhouses. And it's, yeah, it gave me a lot of perspective to share some of the unique, because I have a lot of unique ways that I think about things that is not kind of like the party line. There's certain
Hmm.
things in our community where you're supposed to say this, and you don't
Hmm.
say this, and you don't believe this, like you said, the dogma earlier, it's like,
Hmm.
you don't believe this. But I see things a lot differently. Oftentimes it's like the same stuff kind of from this different angle. And because I don't hear a lot, I'm as far as what with my main message for folks is to get into the mucusless diet healing system. Like, check it out, because inspired so many people. You don't have to agree with everything in there. You don't all the theories and everything. You don't have to agree with everything that the author says, because it's written in kind of an older tradition where you combine philosophy with methodology along with scientific concepts. And so sometimes that throws people off, where they're like, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. And it's like, look at the methodology and take what you need or what you can use, and move forward. But for me, that is the revolutionary and liberation movement of our time, is physiological freedom, learning how to control what you put into your body.
Mm-hmm.
That's the most revolutionary thing you can do. We have these people on
Yeah.
TV with politics and crying about all this kind of stuff. You can't complain about your oppressor when you eat and live like them.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to create the new countercultural movement. That's like the new version of that, where we don't, with like us, we don't want to be a part of that, just whatever that mainstream thing kind of thing is.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we don't even try to fit into that, because
Mm-hmm.
we want to live a life that's just outside of that entire sphere.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just encourage people to, no matter what you've been through, if you get on this path, it's gonna force you to address all the emotional issues, stuff that you've pushed down when you fast. And now I like to talk about a couple different emotional release techniques and things that help me. I always tell people, just find something that works for you. But when you're
Mm-hmm.
fasting, you're gonna need something, because all the old traumas, all that kind of stuff, the old anxieties, all that stuff comes up, and you
Even the
can,
current stuff does too. If like you're going through some stuff, even that becomes magnified if you're like fasting too. Old
yeah,
and new, I feel like, yeah.
yep. It's because it's right there. It forces you to deal with yourself, which is something that I really loved about the mucusless diet, because there's nowhere to hide. You can't go hide in, like, oh, let me go over here, or let me.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you're looking in the mirror, and this is between you and the reflection in the mirror. What are you gonna do?
Mm-hmm.
It's up to you now. And once you understand that it's all about elimination, in the mucusless diet book, Arnold Ehret says vitality equals power minus obstruction. He offers this equation, calls it the equation to life. And
Mm-hmm.
basically it's just simple. It's just a simple equation. It says, look, if you have more obstruction, then there is power to generate movement or momentum, or just power, then whatever that thing is going to be destroyed. So
Mm-hmm.
if you take like a car engine and you fill it up, instead of with gasoline, which is designed for that engine, you fill it up with sand, you're going to destroy that engine. There's going to be the obstruction there, is going to prevent that engine from functioning properly, and it doesn't have the right fuel.
Yeah.
Well, Ehret says that the human body is an air gas engine, where we're running right now on air. Now,
Mm-hmm.
whatever we ate or drank or didn't eat or drink, that's like a secondary experience. Again, that helps us cleanse our body.
Mm-hmm.
But at the first and foremost, the most important thing is the breath and the oxygen that we're breathing. That's like number one importance. And
Yeah.
when we get all filled up with waste and obstructions and constipation, the cells of the body cannot breathe. And
And our
that's
mind
when
is
we
a mess too, like depression and so many things. It's like, well, I want to know what you eat. So, what are you currently eating in a day, if you don't mind sharing?
so well, yeah, well, right now, I guess that
Oh,
before my
yeah, the
juicing,
juicing, I forgot. But it's it
because
before the
it's,
juicing.
yeah, so I'll get up and I'll make some juice, some fresh juice, and sometimes it'll be fruit juice, sometimes vegetable juice, depend. Now I do kind of separate the two, where
Mhm.
I'll have a little bit like some apples or something in my green juice, but I don't do a whole lot of like where I combine a bunch of fruit and like 50 fruit and 50 vegetables or something like that.
Yeah.
But uh but yeah, so I have a juice. then and I might not have that juice for a couple hours, so I might wake up and I'm awake for a couple hours, and then I go make a juice. Then a couple hours later, 2 or 3 hours after the juice, maybe I'll have my first meal, which is often a mono fruit meal. So just whatever is in season. If the pineapples are good, I'll eat that. If the grapes are good, I'll eat that. If oranges are good, then I'll eat that. Like whatever's good. So I'll have that as a meal, and then in the evening, a big raw salad, so just raw combination salad with. I like to mix kind of almost half and half with the firm items and the soft items, and so I'll have some like spring mix and spinach and there, and then some like chopped up cabbage and that kind of stuff, and celery. I love putting celery in there. And then depending on where I'm at, I might have some kind of like steamed vegetable or baked vegetable, like mucus that's 100% mucus free. So something like there's a lot of like squash, baked acorn squash and spaghetti squash and baked zucchini and summer squashes and steamed kale and steamed collard greens, the green leafy vegetables, that kind of stuff. But but I always combine for elimination. And so when I eat my salad, I'll eat the first 25% of the raw salad first, because most of it's raw, and then you just have a little bit of the cooked mucus free item. But so I'll eat about 20% of that, and then I'll start to eat the raw and the cooked kind of at the same time, and so it just helps it eliminate. And generally, so that's like kind of a normal day. Generally, I avoid because something we're doing now. This was Kyrene had got this going is in the mucus free community, the 7-day mucus free challenge.
Yeah.
And so that's basically like, and this is where we differ from a lot of kind of raw foodist mentality, where I would rather see somebody be 100% mucus free and incorporating cooked mucus free foods than to be 100% raw, but they're really addicted to fats, like a lot of where they eat a lot of avocados, a lot of like nuts and seeds, even if they're sprouted.
Yeah, I had 2 avocados yesterday. It's too much, it's too much.
Yeah, and I'm not and some people they think that I'm like no, you can't have it. I was like, no, I've used avocados, but I recognize they're mucus forming. They leave, they don't burn away clean. There's always a residue involved if I eat it, and it's even if I have it with a big salad, there'll be more of a residue left behind, and it won't eliminate as well. But to experience, not because then you start to see how hard it actually is, where you remove all of, if for people that are into oils, you remove all the oils, all the nuts, all the seeds, all the anything that might be starchy or anything like that, and what you're left with is the mucus free stuff. It's not easy. It's not easy to.
Well, what do you say to some people who are like, you only live once, I'm gonna eat the salt, the oil, the pizza, everything? It's like, heck no, I'm not doing that, right? What do you say to people who say that? And would you say like you feel a lot better and a lot happier like this versus before when you were eating those burgers and huge hot dogs and stuff like that?
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. And what I usually tell to those folks is what I try to do is plant the seed that says, okay, I understand how you feel. If you ever change your mind, say you start to go through a bad elimination, say a doctor diagnoses you with some incurable illness, and at that moment you feel like, wait a minute, I didn't think this was going to happen this early. If you ever have that kind of experience, revisit what we had a conversation about. Revisit the mucusless diet healing system, because there's a lot of pain and suffering that is unnecessary, that humanity goes through because we simply are eating wrongly, eating against our species specific diet. And so it's one of those things where, you can't, all I can say is you kind of plant the seeds. That's what I try to do in like some of my videos, where I'll show, show the slaughterhouse and say like, well, don't forget what's going on here, and all that anxiety, all of that pain and suffering of that the animal went through. And then when it was it was slaughtered, and it had all of those all that fear and all that stuff that's built into the tissues, and now you're going to eat that, and then you're
Mm-hmm.
going to wonder why you have panic attacks and anxiety and addicted to tobacco products or marijuana or whatever it is, like smoking things and drinking, and that it becomes this cycle of death. It's this cycle of death, cycle
Mm-hmm.
of pus and mucus poisoning. And then at its extremes, it is one thing that I don't think people talk about enough is how diet affects behavior. And that's
Mm-hmm.
because the majority of people in the mainstream is like, well, I didn't murder anybody, I didn't rape anybody, I eat meat, I'm good. Well, it's just like with drinking alcohol. Not everybody reacts the same to the drug. So some people drink alcohol and they just want to go have a nap. So other people drink alcohol and they get really aggressive and they want to fight everybody. They're that kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. And so what we don't really understand, or most people don't understand, is the degree to which eating pus and mucus forming foods is the foundation of all of this horrible behavior. Because find me one person where there's epidemic of school shootings, there's epidemic of war. Find me one school shooter that's eaten nothing but fruits and green leafy vegetables for years.
I know. Yeah. I remember somebody said once, oh, there was a vegan one, but I don't know. But then it's like, who knows
That's
what they were eating?
that's
Yeah.
always so weak. Yeah,
It's
they
crazy
find that.
times though. It's crazy
Yeah,
times. Things are
yeah,
crazy.
yeah,
And like, yeah, and the foods have just gotten crazier. Even then in the 80s when I was a kid, it's even worse now. It should be getting better. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. And it's just because of that the food. I'm seeing this divide where there's a nice number of us that see the natural path and go down that path, but there's still the majority of people in the world that are just getting worse because the quality of the fast food is even worse today than it was 20 years ago. It's like,
Yeah.
the how low can we go? And so
Yeah.
that's what we're seeing. The every time I see one of these television shows and I'll see it on as a clip on YouTube. I don't watch TV like that. But one of the, like, they suppose what, the Learning Channel, and it's like how to 500-pound life analysis, where they're making fun of and kind of analyzing people's that are really morbidly obese, and it's just there's this whole kind of culture that's around that supports and nurtures the worst, and it's
Mm-hmm.
and it's all, and the foundation of it is pus and mucus eating. And I always
Mm-hmm.
say that because, like, take that out of the equation. In every one of those instances, you take pus and mucus eating out of the equation, what do you have? How does that transform the behavior? Because I
Yeah.
know, even just for me in my life before practicing the MUCUSLESS diet, I was in, that teenage, at young boys thing. We go out and get into brawls, and we're fighting and picking fights, and I enjoyed that. I liked being in those environments. I like being someplace where, I mean, I was at parties where guns got shot in the air
Yeah.
and people were getting, really hurt badly. But that was exciting to me. I enjoyed that because that's hot dogs and
Yeah. Yeah.
and hamburgers, kind of stuff. Like, you like that kind of stimulation, that environment. You take that out of there, I don't want to be around that anymore. Like, I just
It's
my
so true.
environment totally changed. Like, I could, if, like, right now I know where all that mess is at, I could go and like, yeah, I could go hang out, I could go down to the club, I could go, I could go do all that.
Yeah.
I just don't want
No.
to. I don't enjoy it. I don't
That's
get
like me.
nothing
It's
out of
so
it.
true. Because when I used to drink, like I'd go to the strip club, do things like I would
Mm-hmm.
never do now, right? Or even
Right,
like a
right.
couple years ago when I was going through a divorce, I like went off the wagon when I was raw. I was like,
Yeah.
the divorce was a lot to deal with. I was drinking coffee and just eating whatever. And then I was on Tinder and doing all these things that that weren't my true self and that I wouldn't
Right.
otherwise be doing. They were like a product of the vices and things I was putting in me, you know? It's so true. A huge connection between diet and behavior. You should
Yeah.
come back for that topic. We should do another video just on
Yeah.
that topic. If you guys want to see that,
Yeah.
comment down below. I think it's a good one.
Yeah. Yeah. That'd be great.
Yeah, well, I want to know before we get into the viewers' questions, if you have
Mhm.
a little bit of time for those
Oh
questions,
yeah.
I'd
Hmm.
love to ask you. So we all know what the obvious mucus forming foods are, right? Like burgers, pizza, fries, all these things,
Yeah.
donuts, muffins. But what are maybe some of the less obvious mucus forming foods? And what are some of like the ideal foods we should eat? I guess sort of what you laid out in your daily diet, like monofruit meal, salad, stuff like that.
Yeah. And I will say to that, like what I eat now, I got a real long video that I made. It's like what I eat in a day. But what I did was I divided it up into different year segments where it was like, okay, here's an average meal in from years 1 through 3. Here's an average meal
Mm,
years 4 through 10, or what, and because it changes, and that's the
mm,
idea, is you don't have to get to the finish line immediately, where a lot of people I want to be 100% whatever. I want to be 100% raw
mm-hmm.
tomorrow, and I want to be 100% mucus free as soon as possible. It's like, no, just enjoy the process and the journey. And that's one thing that I really started to embrace, was just whatever my body was going to do as I applied the principles would just go down that. But in terms of things that probably the most controversial, and the one that angers folks in the raw foods community the most, would be avocados.
Yeah.
They're mucus forming. I did a video way years ago. It was like, what's the top 10 mucus forming foods that people think are healthy? So I didn't say
Yeah.
were the worst. I just said that people think that they're great.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, look, there's nothing wrong with using it for transitional purposes. If you need make a dressing out of it, or if it's helping you eat more mucus free with your salads and stuff, but just keep in mind, and it's good to take breaks from it. And as you start to clean yourself out, you're going to notice, like, okay, yeah, I'm seeing there's a huge difference, because it's the same whether you're, if you're using different oils, or just the nuts and seeds. That's another one. But again, not all mucus forming items are created equal, and there are best practices when eating it. And so when I used nuts years ago, I would always combine it with some like dried fruits such as raisin. And
Wow.
that's just coming right out of the MUCUSLESS Diet book. Is like, if you're gonna have some nuts or seeds, and you combine it with raisins, unless you're doing something else with it, like if you've been soaking it and you're going to make the dressing out of it, that would fall under like the dressing category. But what else would be on that list that I hear about mucus forming? White potatoes. I mean, that's one that does not that I got off of that immediately. And I know that there's kind of a segment of the vegan community that are like hardcore into the
Potatoes. Yeah.
white potato thing, and I'm just that starch just doesn't eliminate well. It can be used for transitional purposes, but for me, it was easier and tasted better just to transition to baked sweet potatoes, which are relatively way more mucus free. When they're
Mm-hmm.
well baked, and you eat that with a big raw salad, that eliminates a lot better. But the name of the game, it really is elimination for your body. And so it
Mm-hmm.
forces you to observe how what you're eating is eliminating, meaning when you eat, is there any acid reflux? Do you wake up in the morning and belch a little bit, and you're like, wait a minute, there's still what I ate yesterday is still present. When you have a bowel movement, is it slimy? Are you getting everything out? Those are the kinds of things. And when you start to really get keen to that, you'll notice, like, whoa, when I eat this thing, even if it's supposed to be something that's great, in my body, it doesn't eliminate well. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm avoid it. I'm gonna step away from it.
Yeah. And do you take any herbs or supplements as well?
I not real regularly. So there's a couple formulas that I like, intestinal formulas. I Over the years, I've tried to find formulas that are similar to Interclean, because some of the herbs in Arnold Ehret's original Interclean formula are no longer available, or they're just things you can't find. And so I've found things that I like. There's a couple things like some Dr. Morris formulas and Puridyme, and couple things that I like there.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not a big supplement for the sake of nutrition kind of minded person. Like, that's
Mm-hmm.
something that we don't really think in those terms.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't do that kind of stuff where it's like whatever people do, like the B12s and that kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. I'm just not into that. that way of thinking or in that way of feeling, I guess, because I
Mm-hmm.
don't have I don't have those symptoms that you're supposed to have. I'm
Yeah.
supposed to be a mess. Like I'm supposed to be dead, laying out over here, all like soup, whatever. It's like I'm just like, yeah, we've disproven so much of mainstream dietetic and medical theory over. I mean, it's the past 20 years of me practicing this that it's just like we're at a space now where we're just like it all needs to be re-examined. We
Mm-hmm.
need to start over again from the perspective of humans should be mucus free and eating
Mm-hmm.
fruits and green leafy vegetables. How do we get them there? Because it doesn't happen overnight. But when you have that filter, then that removes a lot of the paradoxes that are in Western dietetic theory,
Mm-hmm.
because the paradox of, well, you need to get all this protein, you got to eat this, but that's in the same sphere. They say that may cause cancer, that may cause strokes.
Mm-hmm.
That's a discrepancy there. That
Mm-hmm.
can't. How can you need something that's also going to kill you?
Mm-hmm.
I don't agree. I
Exactly.
don't agree with that.
Yeah,
So
100%.
it's
100%.
yeah. So I don't see things where people are eating apples and it's like, oh, these apples are causing
Yeah.
colon cancer. These apples,
Right?
it's not,
Yeah.
it doesn't
Yeah,
happen.
exactly. Well, I'd love to ask you some of the viewers' questions. My viewers are
Yeah.
amazing and they prepare the best questions. So, Take Care of Yourself asks, so said, I would love his take on pathogens and if he believes slash observed their existence and what he thinks about the theory that it's actually them creating the mucus because they feed on certain foods like milk products, gluten, eggs, meat, and high protein plants, etc.
So pathogen and the concept of and Ehret talks about this in the Mucus's diet, and I agree with him. Where we went back in the Middle Ages, there was this concept of this evil force
Hmm.
that would possess. If somebody was sick, they would really send in more or less kind of like a medicine man type of thing, or people that would like exorcists or stuff, where they would just, if you got sick, they would blame it on some spirit that came into you. Of
Hmm.
course, they had no clue it was about diet. It was just some external force.
Hmm.
In modern day medicine, in the modern times, the evil spirit that possesses somebody to be sick is now been shifted over to the virus, the infectious thing, the pathogen, that kind of stuff. And so
Hmm.
one thing that's pretty fascinating was Arnold Ehret actually put himself. He often did experiments on himself, and he gave himself some like real things that are supposed to be really bad. Like he put himself around some horrible viruses, and he had got infected, and he fasted for 2 days, flushed himself out, and it was gone.
Wow.
And that's part of like showing like whatever these proteins are that build up and this kind of stuff that
Yeah.
people want to blame everything on them. And it's like, no, for them to be in your system, you have to have a certain degree of filth internally, and then to not be eating or fasting or doing things on the other end, that would help to eliminate.
Hmm.
And so yeah, so as far as the pathogen and the virus theory and all that kind of stuff, I'm on the side of that. Poisons, any kind of poison is going to is going to affect the body, chemically in
Hmm.
some way, but that's not the foundation of any kind of human illness. And the cleaner you are, and when you understand the real just detox processes, then whatever it is that's not supposed to be in your system is going to be flushed away.
Yeah. Okay. And the next question, SP said, would love to hear his views on the struggles while transitioning and what are his recommendations are for people as they work through old cooked food addictions and comfort patterns. I know he stresses a lot on properly transitioning and enjoying the journey of transitioning.
Yeah. So what comes to mind initially on one of the toughest things about the transition for most people are social dynamics, social issues, because that I've seen that cause
Yeah.
people to relapse more than almost anything.
Yeah.
And so that's one of those places where I each person has to kind of find their way to deal with that. My way was I was really hardcore about I'm not going to let social dynamics be the thing that caused me to get off my path. And if when I have relapses and that kind of stuff, it's going to be because of internal issues. It's not going to be
Mm-hmm.
because I got a call from some friends that are like, hey, we're going to the restaurant, we're going to the club. Why don't you come
Yeah.
join us? So I learned that early on because I did do it, early on. I thought that I could be strong enough, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go and I'm hang out, but I'm just going to order some vegetables and this kind of stuff. Then you start realizing like, man, these restaurants are not built for us.
No,
They're
they're
not built for
not.
this transition. You
And
you
where are you
gotta.
located? I just have to ask.
I'm in Columbus, Ohio.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And from when I started practicing the diet, I was in Cincinnati, Ohio, which is about an hour and a half south of where I live now. And yeah, it's not, these restaurants are not, that's just too, it's not a good thing. And then you get in these environments, it's like an alcoholic that's not supposed to go to a bar
Mm-hmm.
because you think that you have control until you walk in there and you look at the menu, and then all of a sudden you're like, well, let me just have a cheat day. And
Mm-hmm.
then you find yourself ordering the cheeseburger and like, well, it's been a while, I've been good. Like, I mean, just all this
Yeah.
negotiation and rationalization in your head. So that would just be something I would, look into that. That to me is, that's where I like somebody like a modern day example of this type of attitude would be like a David Goggins attitude. I mean,
Yeah.
I had that attitude when it came to the social stuff, because if it was something that I had to go to, or like a banquet or something that was just
Mm-hmm.
like part of my university experience, I didn't have a problem standing out. I literally would show up with lemons, and I would put a plate of lemons in front of me, and all these people around me are eating whatever filet mignon or whatever it was that's supposed to be special that they give you, and I'm sitting here just sucking on a lemon like I don't care. It's like
Yeah.
I just don't want. I don't need to fit in with you guys. I don't need your validation or approval. I just had that type of attitude about it,
I think
and
it's
and that's
important to put
helpful.
yourself first too, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And do you still feel as satisfied socially on the lifestyle?
yeah. I mean, I'm more satisfied. I mean, it's like it's gotten better and better. Part of that is the work that we've done, where I I saw a need for a mucus free community that was distinctive and would help people with this on this path, because I kind of looked around and I saw all these different types of communities and vegan communities and stuff, and I'm like, but none of them really fit like what we do and kind of in
Mm-hmm.
our mindset and where we're coming from. And so I've tried to create the mucus free community to create that support system, and people are, they get together, and we have a Wednesday meetup every week, and all that kind of stuff to just keep everybody on point. Because
Yeah.
for me, when I got started, I had the benefit of being around Brother Air, and there was a
Mm-hmm.
group of a small community of people in Cincinnati that and families that practice the diet, that that was just kind of underground practice, but still this had traditionally been a practice for people that are very self-motivated, that
Mm-hmm.
don't have to rely on other people to be motivated and inspired
Yeah.
to do the work. And so
Yeah.
that was helpful for me early on. But like I said, we're trying to we're trying to create those support systems for folks on this path, just to make it easier, make it better, make it more fun, because
Yeah.
it is fun. We've for the past, well, we missed a year because of why, but for the
Mm-hmm.
past 5 years, we did 4 annual Professor Arnold Ehret Day celebrations, and it's just an incredible experience to be around like-minded people, folks that everybody there's read the Mucus Diet book, practices the Mucus Diet, and it's a whole different vibe. It's just a
Yeah.
whole different experience, and so that's something that I want to continue to grow so that
Yeah.
other people can plug into.
Absolutely. That's amazing. And okay, the next question, Coco Bell says, how do we heal our small and big cavities? I have two, but I want to heal them naturally. Do you think that's possible? I don't know.
Cavities in the teeth.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the teeth, that's one thing that I have seen certain cavities be healed or if somebody's oil
Hmm.
pulling and fasting and cleansing. But then I've also seen situations where people were too aggressive in they didn't transition long enough, and all the acids came out at once. All these like the lymphatic, you got where the lymph system moves here in the jaw and in the mouth, and all that kind of hit at once. And when it's like it's not good to go when you're all inflamed and stuff. And there's some dentist that'll just say that they'll literally want to take all your teeth out when that happens. But if you that's just a detox symptom. You go long enough, everything's gonna tighten back up there. But
Yeah.
um, but yeah, with the teeth, I'm a fan of naturopathic dentistry. So I tell people because
Yeah.
for a lot of folks, because first and foremost, don't blame the fruits and the vegetables for your teeth because
Hmm.
that's what people want to do. It's like, yeah, okay, unless
Well,
you have
dates
some.
though, don't you think dates can be bad for the teeth if you're eating in large quantities dates? I notice teeth sensitivity if I do that. Otherwise, I don't really notice with anything else.
Yeah, it's just so unripened fruit can be problematic. I mean, I've never really had problems with dates,
Hmm.
but that's what's interesting. Each person kind of has their little things. Like now, if I have some unripened like pineapple or something, if I just can't help myself and I eat some unripened pineapple, then I can get a little bit of sensitivity there. But I'm also dealing with the situation of I took the doctors gave me so much moxicillin and penicillins and all of that stuff when I was really young. It actually way before I started practicing the diet, it ruined a bunch of the enamel on my teeth
Hmm.
with all their
Yeah.
drugs at a young age. And so we bring a lot of the mouth and teeth traumas into the lifestyle when we start to cleanse. And so I tell people to keep that in mind. But no, I'm a fan of just good oral hygiene.
Hmm.
I'm kind of like in the stay away from fluoride camp, and so I like to go to naturopathic dentists that deal with natural stuff. But for me, it makes sense if you have because you don't want it, if you do have a cavity, if you have this decaying enamel, you don't want that to get down into the deeper parts of the tooth. And so
Hmm.
for me, just on a
Yeah.
logical standpoint, it makes sense. If you have somebody, okay, let's get that decayed part out of there and then put something that's not toxic in there and
Yeah.
ceramic or whatever they're into now. And it makes sense to me
Makes
in
sense.
terms
Me
of
too.
just like there's certain things we gotta, we're like I said, we we gotta do what we gotta do because we're coming from such a rough situation.
Yeah, and you want to be
And
careful. I mean, you don't want it to get to a point where it's like, okay, you have to have a root canal or have the tooth pulled too. Because then it's like,
yeah,
I have one root canal in
no.
my mouth. I'm like, I want to get that out. And then it's just like, I agree. Okay, the next question, they said, Fruit Adventure Bora said, I'm curious if you can ask his views on the ethics of veganism and if he thinks about living in community.
Yeah, so I'm definitely on board with the vegan, vegans for the animals part, but for me, it had to come after changing my physiology. And so I've had conversations with some like hardcore ethical vegans that don't eat the best, but they're like, and they really come at people pretty
Yeah.
hard from that angle. And my message to them is that like, look, for me, in my case, you weren't going to win me over with empathy because the way I was eating, I had no empathy. There
Hmm.
you could have. I was
True.
totally desensitized to. You could show me slaughterhouse videos, and at that, I could have probably killed the animal myself. Like I was not squeamish to none of that. I could care less when I was in that mode. After I cleaned myself out for even just 4 or 5 months, I had started to totally transform my spirit and my mental capacity to the point where now I'm feeling things way more.
Hmm.
Like I'm actually feeling like I can even just a cat walking by me. I can feel that cat now. I'm feeling and I'm feeling
Yeah.
animals and dogs. I'm feeling people. If somebody walks by and they are in pain and hurt, like I can like why am I feeling like I know that person is in pain. I'm not supposed to feel that, but I know that for some people in your audience, they're like, well, I've always been like that. That's how I,
Mhm.
and there's a lot of people that,
Yeah.
yes,
True.
you know, a lot of folks that have, you know, and traditionally, you know, women have been known to operate in that way, to feel, to just be empathetic. I didn't have that, you know, not like that. But after
Mhm.
I started cleaning myself up, now I'm like feeling, and that can even be a thing where you have to learn how to deal with that, because now
True,
you're
yeah.
feeling all of these vibrations are coming at you, and it's just like, oh, you know, so you that's a whole other thing. But so what I did, like the last time that I had ever had any kind of meat products or stuff, I had waited, it was maybe like 4 or 5 months into practicing the diet really seriously. And I hadn't eaten meat in a while, but it wasn't something that was 100% out yet. And but I got to a point where I was like, okay, this is the time. And this was the early years of where you could download videos, it was and stuff like that. So I downloaded a slaughterhouse video, that Meat Your Meat, a slaughterhouse video, and I was fasting. I was doing a juice fast at that point, and I watched it, and I was just sitting there crying and just like,
Wow.
never gonna eat that again, you know. And so that, but that had the transformation of diet had to come first for me,
Me too.
you
Yeah.
know. And then it was like, oh, now I
Me
have the
too.
capacity to understand that
Yeah.
I've been doing something so horrible, and no wonder I was in pain. And then I created the concept of physiological karma, where essentially whatever you eat, however you live, sooner or later you're going to have to pay those repercussions. And so I think of that when I go through things that are unpleasant in my transition. I think back to that, like,
Good
I
point.
I deserve this. Like, okay, I get it. Like,
I like that.
the pain and the suffering that I inflicted, that I was a part of, I understand why I got to go through something, you know, to get
Mhm.
to kind of burn off that, you know, that karma.
Mhm. Maybe we get a bit better karma on the fruits and veggies, you know? It's like I was
Yeah.
at the store the other day stocking up because I'm still juicing so much, and my
Mm-hmm.
whole cart, I went to Chinatown, my whole cart was like coconuts, oranges, all it was. And then it's so funny, I had a little red cart, the girl behind me, her whole cart was meat. And she
Yeah.
was so nice. Like we were talking, her
Right.
whole cart was literally meat. It was like this big, and my cart, and it was all meat. And we were talking, I was like, we have opposite diets. I like laughing. And then I went to check out and I was like, can I please bring this cart to my car? Because I can't like carry all this, right? And then
Uh,
she was like, "Oh, I have to ask them the same thing. I didn't bring in my bags." And then they let me go do it and they didn't let her. I was like, that's a sign for me to just always stay on this path, you know? I thought it was
yeah,
so
yeah,
interesting.
yeah. It's one of those things where I've experienced, you don't always get what you want, but you get what you need
Mhm.
on this path. And I know that's probably sounds like a cliche and that was in a song, but that's true. It's like, you know,
Yeah.
it's really, you know, and because I've had that experience a lot over the years, especially if I was fasting,
Yeah.
just things would line up. You
Yeah.
just see things kind of line up properly, like, oh,
Right?
okay,
Yeah.
cool, you know. And you just, because I'm gonna focus on this, and I'm gonna just let everything else do what it's gonna do, and you know, and that, just leave it
Yeah.
there,
I love
you
that
know.
perspective though. The karmic thing you said. I love that. Okay, the next question. Natalie said, according to late Professor Ehret, what is the best diet for human? Is it raw fruits and vegetables or a mucusless cooked diet?
Well, so the ultimate goal would be raw fruits, you know. So
Mhm.
this is where it like needs a little explanation, because sometimes folks read the book and they take little bits and pieces, and then it blows it out of context. So there's a difference between the optimal diet for humans being fruit, and us being a frugivorous species, and our capability of doing it right away with no transition, or with, you know, whatever. And everybody, then that becomes people's path on how do you get to those different levels. But in terms of just the best diet for humans would be a raw fruit diet of some kind of fruit that's in season. How long does it take to get to that? Would that be feasible? You know, that's, you know, there's no rush to that, you know. Just
Mhm.
practicing the system and being invested in the system is then what's recommended.
Mhm. Okay. And the next question they ask, can you talk about the spirituality on the diet and fasting? I know we talked a little bit about that. I don't know if there's anything you want to add
Mm.
to that.
Just, that's one of those things that I encourage people to explore and study and analyze things for themselves, contemplate, do a lot of contemplation,
Mhm.
and go on those journeys. You're going those spiritual journeys. I mean, I've had so many just different experiences and out of body experiences and communicating with things. It's like, but I tend to not talk about all that because then people are like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? It's like, well,
Yeah.
those are personal experiences, and I don't need to prove anything to anybody. So
Yeah.
I usually I keep it like right, like, well, here's the methodologies that regardless of what you believe in, everybody can benefit from and use this.
Mhm.
But yeah, for me, I will say that yeah, my spirituality transformed and enhanced the cleaner I got and the more that I got on the mucusless diet healing system.
Mhm.
And I have done long fasts over the years, and I would have just all kinds of experiences and revelations. That's see, I'm a big fan of contemplation and analysis, and sitting and really observing and thinking things through, letting things go and getting in tune with oneself. And that's how I've developed a lot of things that people like, that I say or that I write about, that's unique, comes from those experiences. Oftentimes it comes
Mhm.
from when I'm fasting. It comes from having cultivated that alternate way to see reality in the world. But yeah, no, I'm definitely a fan. Initially studying all the different religious and philosophical thoughts around the globe, and then you kind of create your path,
Yeah.
what feels good to you.
Absolutely. Okay. And Mary said she wants to know how much water should I be drinking on a long water fast, say 21 days. I feel like somebody should go to somewhere supervised for that, don't you think? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so yeah, I don't promote a lot of water fasting unless, like, yeah, like that's something that's a specific recommendation for somebody where, like, okay,
Mhm.
you need to do the water. Arnold Ehret, as I know, because I know in the realm of fasting, there different people have different definitions of what fasting is. For some
Mhm.
people, dry fasting is only fasting, like anything
Yeah.
else but
No,
just
I
being
know.
dry.
Yeah.
Then there's the water fasting purist, and then juice fasting, and then you get kind of even these other levels. But for me, yeah, water fasting, if you're gonna do that, yeah, it's a good idea to be supervised. But I'm just a fan of using the transitional methodology long term, and doing the short term fast that build up to the longer fast naturally, to
Mhm.
where instead of kind of going through something where you're just just really with zero transition in or out. I like to see people just really embrace the transition diet and the healing system that includes fasting.
Mhm.
And you get to a point where, because I also like to tell people to, the short term fast gets you ready when your body demands that you do a longer fast.
Mhm.
And so if you start going through elimination and cold and flu like symptoms and feel really tired and fatigued and all that kind of stuff, you want to have enough fasting experience that, with just as a reflex, it's, I'm fasting.
Mhm.
And what that is for your body. What, and you're, and because you shouldn't be trying to run marathons and that kind of stuff when you're fasting, at least when you're starting out. That's
Mhm.
more advanced. But so yeah, so I'm just an advocate for Arnold Ehret's fasting methodologies and building yourself up to the point where, I think my friend brother Air, I mean, he did a 40-day dry fast like some
Wow.
months ago.
Oh
And
my
so,
gosh.
but that's the for him, that's the logical conclusion of the transitional work that he's done for 40 years.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Okay, wow. Well, the next question, a great question again. So, why do you think so many people heal and lose weight on the starch-based diet, and yet most starches cause mucus in the body? For example, rice is thought to cause a lot of mucus in the body, and yet cultures that have rice and vegetables as a staple tend to be thin and healthy.
Well, the healthy part, because that could be argued, because There's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of folks that are thin and don't have any fat, and they're getting strokes in their 40s
Mm-hmm.
and in their 50s and their
Mm-hmm.
60s. Now, so Arnold Ehret's explanation for this, he had two different body types. He basically divides human bodies into two types. One is a lean type or uric acid type, and those are the people that can pretty much eat anything and they don't gain any weight.
Mm-hmm.
And in modern day, they'd be like, oh, they have high metabolism. But we look at that as that's somebody that overall has more acids in their system, and is a bit more kind of got like that kind of toxic waste rolling around in them. So they process mucus differently than somebody that is a mucus type or a fat type, where they just have a little bit of something and they kind of blow up. And it's really just how those individual bodies are choosing to process the mucus forming food, whether the fat or the starch or whatever it is. But when you're talking about, so a lot of the folks when you're talking about these different countries, and they have like a lot of rice and a lot of that kind of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of those folks are lean body type, like uric acid kind of body types. And so there's often a lot of chemical interference,
Mm-hmm.
particularly if they start to try to clean themselves up and eat more fruits and green leafy vegetables. The kinds of elimination and side effects that they're going to have are going to be more related to these this neutralizing these acids.
Mm-hmm.
But that's one way. But that's how as we could also bring up that used to be the Atkins diet. They change the name every year, but Atkins diet, carnivore diet, keto diet, blah blah blah. The meat centric
Yeah.
kinds of carb free kinds of things. Essentially, what that does is that infuses so much acid waste into the body that it just burns everything up.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, okay, great, you lost some weight, but it didn't help you get healthier. That increased your likelihood of any number of illnesses or ailments down the road. And but that was something, and I've worked with a number of people over the years that did that. They were overweight, then they went on Atkins diet and lost weight, but they also lost the ability to have natural bowel movements. Eating all that meat destroyed their colon and their
Mm-hmm.
intestines. And so that was something that we had to work with them and transition back into. Some I didn't mention earlier, the baked fruit, because that's another transitional item that a lot of sometimes the raw folks miss out on. That was really, really helpful. So if you
Mm-hmm.
like I have a recipe called baked banana surprise. It's a baked apple, fresh applesauce, and chopped dates. That's
Mm.
like
That sounds freaking good.
it's off the chain, yeah. And
Yeah.
baked apples. I love baked apples with some cinnamon or nutmeg or whatever. And there's a whole world of just the baked and stewed fruits that can be very helpful where when you do bake the fruits, it makes it not as aggressive,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also mucus free. So it's just hitting it kind of in between, like right, in a different at a different angle. But yeah, in terms of just the world populations, and everybody needs to get on this transition, because
Yeah.
it's like what you're looking at also is different people have essentially their bodies have learned to tolerate
Mm-hmm.
different forms of eating. And so when
Mm-hmm.
you see people that haven't really changed how they eat in a bunch of generations, they may be able to live longer, even if they're eating not optimally
Mm-hmm.
for what would be optimal in our opinion. But what you usually don't see is overeating. So even if somebody's eating like a little tiny bowl of rice once a day, they're like a bowl of rice and some other little, like a mandarin, or it's like
Yeah.
they're eating a scant diet that is good, that is within the principle of vitality equals power minus obstruction, meaning they're eating a small amount, even if it's not the greatest food, even if it's like a small amount of meat. That's still, those people could live longer than a vegetarian or a starchitarian that's eating all kinds of starch and all kinds of whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so we take it back to that principle of vitality equals power minus obstruction, which is always going to be the rule.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Anna Marie, she has a great question. Everybody does, but okay, mucusless foods don't contain much ALA, which later has to be converted into EPA and DHA. Those are all considered essential for the body. What are your thoughts on omega 3s in general, not just part of the healing system? I think omega 3s are so important. I just did a great video with somebody on this topic specifically. So that should be out right now when this video airs, and I will link it down below if it is. Otherwise, it's coming soon. And I think these are important. I take algae for this every day, a really good one, which I'll link below, and an all-in-one with this, and like walnuts, flax seeds, and stuff too. But I think the algae is just great for it. But what are your thoughts on that?
So, I mean, supplement people don't like us because we don't, we don't, we kind of don't not too much into that way of thinking, and so I've just not seen any. So anytime somebody has symptoms associated with what people would call deficiency, when I've worked with those people, when I see those folks and we start getting into it, it's like, okay, well, what are you eating? What's the condition of your colon? How
Mm-hmm.
constipated are you on a cellular level? How is your endocrine glands functioning? And when you clean the gut up and you fix the adrenal issues and the thyroid issues and the pineal gland issues, I find that generally, brain fog goes away, fatigue goes away, weakness goes away, the inability to build natural muscle, that goes away just as you clean yourself out properly and eat the transitional foods. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's one of them topics where I kind of like just leave it alone, where it's like, well,
Yeah.
if that's something that's good for everybody, then for us, I've just found that it's easy to get lost sometimes in the problematic logics that have developed in the Western dietetic theory and the nutritional theory. And one of the things that I do, that I encourage other people to do, is to check out the history of these theories. And I did a video on the history of the protein theory, the history of the calorie theory, and when you get into the histories, you're like, well, wait a minute. First of all, they're not that old. They're fairly
Mm-hmm.
new concepts, and most of them were developed by people who assumed and had a supposition that we need to eat a diet like they ate, that we need to eat dead animal flesh, that we need to
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of the folks that created these theories, they thought that the way they lived was the best. They didn't go study how other people ate around the world and that kind of stuff. They were like, well, look, we're the greatest people on the planet. This is how we eat. So we're going to create a nutritional paradigm that supports and nurtures how we already eat. And
Mm-hmm.
so the whole omnivoric, all these concepts, and the word protein meaning first principle. And so initially, this concept was like that this is the most important substance that you need in your life. And it's like, well, wait a minute, in the most important substance air?
Mm-hmm.
Because we know we can go days without eating food, but we can't go 5-10 minutes without breathing air. So
True. That's a fact.
that's like the most. So that I would think that would be the protein. Like that'd be the first principle to life, would be air
Mm-hmm.
and breathing. And so that's something that folks could look into. Look at the Mulder and Francois Magendie and these guys. The whole protein theory came out of torturing dogs. This guy, man, this dude was a trip. This Magendie guy literally had government sanction him. Like who they were like, wait, you can't keep doing this to animals, because
Wow.
he would starve animals and just really abuse them. And so
Wow.
the protein theory itself is coming out of that, because he was
Mm-hmm.
starving dogs and analyzing, and he would give some dogs, some basically would be like supplements or some kind of nitrogenous
Jeez.
something here and there. And so then they would just report which dog died first. And he was like, oh, very interesting. The dog that had water only died before the dog that had water with my little nutritional supplement that I put in there. And so they started creating an entire form of reasoning that's based on this. Okay, well, you need, you need this, you need all this stuff. And so that's part of what we explore is kind of like, well, what don't we need? Like let's put, I mean, we've kind of put that to the test with our own bodies as far as like, okay, where they say you need all this stuff. Okay, well, why are we not dead? Then like, why can we function highly, and not to, to get, to like, pat myself on the back or toot my own horn. But, I was able on this diet, I was able to get 4 academic degrees, including a PhD. I wrote a 500-page dissertation, and I did a lot of that actually while I was fasting. You're not supposed to be able to do that if you're deficient and you're all, hunched over somewhere or malabsorbed. Well, that's generally when a lot of people are malabsorbed. There's too much acid in their system because they really didn't flush out the old, that old waste. So, so for me, the cleanliness is first and foremost, and then whatever else you build on top of that is beautiful. But like, if you can put that as an important principle in your life, then you're going to be on a good path.
Yeah. Okay. And just one more question from this viewer, and then a couple more. But so they said, how do you minimize stress in your life? I think that's a good question.
Yeah, I kind of keep my bubble pretty tight. I got my mucus-free bubble, so I like to study. I'm not one of these people that ignores the world. I study current events and what's happening and what's going on. I keep apprised of what's going down, because that helps me be able to communicate with people and folks I'm trying to communicate with. But yeah, but in terms of like toxic energies and that, like, I don't accept it at all. I don't let that toxic energy into my bubble, and my got, close group of friends and, group of MUCUSLESS diet practitioners, because that's something that some people have challenges with, where they'll be going on this path, but they try to keep friendships with folks from their old life, that are still eating meat and dairy and that kind of stuff. And I just didn't, I just kind of, I don't have a whole lot of those kind of, outside of like music and my band and the different bands that I played with over the years and that kind of stuff. That was really where that I would be in those kind of environments, or where there might be some meat kind of stuff going on. Or, I played a casino gig one time, and they had the worst smelling, some kind of crawfish weird mess that they were serving. I was like, oh God, this is the worst smelling thing in the world. So if it wasn't for the music, I would even be more outside, like more away from all that kind of stuff. But yeah, for me, that's important. Just controlling setting those boundaries, and the healthy mucus-free boundaries, and just really not letting that, as much as possible, trying to keep the vibe good. The other thing I do is, I was talking about emotional releasing techniques earlier, and I've studied a lot of them from all the neurolinguistic programming and self-hypnosis and hypnotherapy, all that stuff. But I really like something called Sedona method, which is a releasing technique that's just kind of very natural, that you can just sit and just do by yourself. But that's been a very, very important tool that I've used over the years, that just help any kind of stress and anxieties or anything that was starting to build up. I've learned how to release it almost on just immediately. And
wow, that's amazing. That's huge. I think the world would be a better place if we all could just release it so quickly like that.
And it's supposed to be like that, because if you look at in the example that they use in the Sedona world, is if you look at young children, like really young children, before they've been, or went through the human orientation of, just pus and mucus, and basically being taught to suppress, to not express yourself, to suppress how you feel, to really filter all of your communications. Before you're taught to do that from culture, you'll see like a little baby or a young person go through a range of emotions in a short period of time. Like in a minute, they might be like sad. Then like 10 seconds later, they're kind of in wonder. And then, 10 seconds later, they're smiling and happy. Like 10 seconds later, they look sad. Like they're not holding on to those emotions. It's naturally being let go. what Sedona method does is it helps you remember how to do that. It taps you
Wow.
back into the natural letting go of whatever the emotion is, the emotions that's sitting there. It teaches you how to let them go in just a very natural kind of method. And
That's good. Because I think we live in a world where people act like and might think like those emotions are bad, you know? We're not supposed to feel that way as adults, and you're supposed to just be happy all the time. And if you're feeling like that, something's wrong with you. You know what
right.
I mean?
Yeah, yeah, no, it's really important to let go, and also for people that are brave enough to follow their passion and do what they're passionate about. That's important to me. And I always tell people to plug into and do what it is that you're passionate about, because it makes the diet so much easier. And I'm saying outside of diet, because we're all
Mhm.
supposed to be into that. So if
Yeah.
you're passionate about whatever, in my case, music and education, educating people, studying, just that's things that I'm passionate about. But whatever it is, some people are passionate about maybe food prep or preparing food for people, or helping people, just whatever it is. But to do what you're passionate about, as long as it doesn't hurt other people, that can help you so much, because you feel better, just in terms of your stress level. You
Yeah.
don't feel like you're being forced to do something that you hate. And
Mhm.
because that just doesn't, because that is a thing that when with some people, as they start to clean themselves up, they can't do the old jobs that they used to do. And I know a number of folks that were executives and had very well paying jobs, and in society they would be looked at as like, well, you're in the greatest position that you could be in. And they gave it up sometimes, because they're like, I don't, my vibration doesn't jive
Yeah.
with that anymore. Like, I'd rather.
100%. I think that's
Yeah,
common.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So Chris is asking, do you have any book recommendations on topics other than diet, spirituality, philosophy, psychology?
Yeah, I like the whole team of book is I like there's, I don't agree with everything. There's a couple things in there that's a little problematic, but the Man's Higher Consciousness book I really like. I like reading. There's a book called with Universal Visions of Paradise by Heinberg. That's kind of interesting, just because it has an analysis of shared mythologies. There's one example of a mythology that all peoples around the world have, is some kind of flood catastrophe where the flood destroyed where they lived and their ancestors. That's a common one that you can go to people all over the globe, and they'll have some kind of flood mythology. That's a good one. And I like going back over some of the classic books, but reading it through a different lens. Reading it through a mucus-free kind of lens, like whether it be Bhagavad Gita or the Bible or Quran or whatever it is. I went after I had practiced the diet, I went back and read through those books again. This was years ago, but I've read through everything, and it was like they were totally different books coming from a
Yeah.
mucus free perspective. It's like,
Yeah.
wow, and even the classic, like I like some of the Plato and the Socratic dialogues. I really like, one of the books I came out with was Spira Speaks, Essays and Dialogues on the Mucus Diet Healing System. That the art of dialogue is something that I cherish and is not really being perpetuated properly, I think, in educational institutions, unfortunately, and things. But the art of dialogue, because you don't have to agree,
Mhm.
but there's a
Yeah.
logic that happens in the so-called Socratic exchanges, where we can have a conversation, and the idea is that we can land at truth and get to a level of truth. And so yeah, so I like, Plato, Aristotle, all that kind of stuff. I'm a fan of studying all that.
Mhm.
All the above. David Hawkins, he comes to mind. I enjoy
Mhm.
a lot of his work over the years. A lot of those folks have good things to say, and there's good principles. But what I find is you always got to bring the mucus diet with you to those studies, because it will color it, and it's usually a missing link. It's usually a thing
Mhm.
that's not, like, they'll have some other principles that are really solid, that are helpful, and can be transformative. But when you bring the diet part with you, then that can really take it to a whole different level.
Yeah, 100%. And someone's just wondering, do you use apple cider vinegar?
I don't. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not a vinegar fan. And that's another thing that some people get mad about. For me, it's just use lemon juice instead. Like, and
Hmm.
that's what Ehret recommended, because he was basically like, he didn't just strictly say it, but he's like, look, don't use vinegar. Just
Hmm.
instead just use lemon juice. And so I've always just done that. And so, and for me, it's so pungent. It's just so pungent, and just
Hmm.
like, and as you do get cleaner and you get away from it, you don't want that anymore. That real
Hmm.
pungent kind of like, you
True.
just you just don't want that.
Yeah, true. Good point. Well, it's been amazing talking to you. I feel like I've really enjoyed
Yeah.
this. And I hope the viewers have as well. And I'd love if you have any words to end off. That would be great. Like anything maybe to encourage somebody out there who's not maybe feeling their healthiest and how to get to the other side like you've done. And if you could let everybody know where to find you as well. And I'll link everything down below, your books, everything.
Yeah. So my message is, first and foremost, don't be hard on yourself, and don't try to, beat yourself up and push yourself so hard that you're like, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be 100% this or that. Try to let go of, if you come to the table with some dogmas, you can kind of try to let go of a little bit of that and just keep an open mind. If you check out the MUCUSLESS diet or you move forward, and to just stick with the system, and this isn't something you don't have to prove anything to anybody, that you don't have to, if you don't feel like sharing and putting yourself out there, because I've seen sometimes folks, I see that where they'll share on social media as a way to like try to construct some kind of accountability for themselves, and I'm like,
Yeah.
don't do that. That's not a good idea. Like, just
Yeah.
do this for you, and then later on when you're sharing, it's just like, you're not looking for that kind of relationship. You're just sharing because you feel like sharing, and that's a less toxic practice to do. But yeah, but main thing, yeah, don't be hard on yourself, and keep going. Just keep on cleaning
Hmm.
yourself out. And I definitely recommend. So this is our version of the MUCUSLESS Diet Healing System, the annotated, revised, and an edited edition. So it has the original text, or most of the original material from the MUCUSLESS Diet in there. But as an editor, I went in, I added annotations that explain certain things. There's a number of concepts and definitions and things that I've just noticed over the years people had no clue what he was talking about. And so I just kind of clarify that's those kind of things throughout. We have there's an entire list of mucus forming versus mucus free foods that's in our edition. And so, yeah, I always just encourage, whether you get our version or a different version, or multiple versions, check
Yeah.
out the MUCUSLESS Diet Healing System, and read it with an open mind. Like I said earlier, you don't have to agree with everything right out of the gate. It's not that type of thing. You have to, like, it's like, oh, I gotta agree with everything Eric says. Like, no, just
Yeah.
read it with an open mind and understand he nailed the foundation of human illness, that, and or at least if you're reading it for the first time, that's what it's got to live up to.
Hmm.
That's what we're claiming. It's like, look, this we figured it out. We figured out the so-called remedy for human illness, why humans degenerate into these chronic conditions that we're in. And it didn't happen overnight, so we're not going to fix it overnight, but we can take a step, and we
Hmm.
can take the first step and start to clean it up. But
Hmm.
yeah, no, I really appreciate being on here, Gillian, and thank you so much for inviting me. I thank all of your fans there for these beautiful questions, and
Yeah.
yeah.
And if there's any questions I missed, I'm really sorry I couldn't get to everything, but I will try ask it in the next one because I'd love to have you back on. I think
Yeah,
it'd be
I would
great to
love to
have you
come
back
back.
on to do like a full list of foods, the mucus forming foods that we think are good, but they're not. And then like to talk about how diet affects behavior. Or if you guys have any other ideas, then comment down below. I would love to hear them. And I love interacting with you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a big thumbs up right now. Make sure to subscribe if you don't already, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.